Hey, hi everyone. Hope you all are doing great. Yes, welcome to yet another episode of MVP Connect. But before we start, let's go through our code of conduct. And yes, I am Parth Varu, Events and Program Manager for Microsoft Reactor India. And yes, I do welcome you all once again. Before we start our today's session, please go through the code of conduct. We are all here to learn together, so please be respectful of other people's views, understanding their differences. Be kind and considerate in a way we all engage. Yes, we do encourage you all to participate. Please drop all your questions in the comment section and we'll pick it up from there. And now, yes, I would like to bring in our MVP for today's event. That's Samik Roy. Hey, hi, Samik. How are you doing? I think, Samik, you are on
Oh,
mute.
sorry. I'd say thank you, Parth, and thank you to the Reactor team for giving me an opportunity today to present. Um, yeah,
So, something on Microsoft Copilot looks exciting today. What have we got?
so I think I'm going to talk about the youngest Copilot in the thing. I mean, it's still youngest Copilot for security, and today we're going to talk about how anybody using it can build their efficiency within the organization or their SOC team. So, yep.
Sounds interesting. The floor is all yours.
Thank you, thank you. And with that said, I'd my screen is already shared, but before I get started, I would like to thank you everyone for joining from wherever you are. And with that, we'll get started. So let me try to get the first thing. So today we are going to talk about enhancing the security operation efficiency with Microsoft Copilot for Security. Now, and in this, what you're going to talk about is basically, let's say you are using Copilot and then you have played around it a little bit, right? And how basically you can understand why the tool is meant for and what are the different ways you can actually utilize it to the best benefit for the team. And when I say it's a SOC team or security operations team, we try to combine all the roles starting from junior analyst, senior analyst, and anybody in the team, and everybody plays a different role altogether, right? So that the team comes all together, and herein the augmenter copilot helps really in a very neat way to integrate in the efficiency and building it to the fullest, right? With that said, myself, Samik Roy, and I'm an MVP, MCD, and author. And you can find me on LinkedIn for any time, any query you have around Copilot for security. And here's a QR code which you can scan to get started. And I'm also an author I mentioned, which released last year. It was KQL specifically for Microsoft Sentinel. And I'm also available over LinkedIn, YouTube, GitHub, and also there's a Udemy course. You want to learn KQL, you can go ahead and grab it for free. Now, with that said, I'll just move on to the next thing and we will try to understand the agenda today. So, the agenda is we'll go through the introduction, wherein we talk about why exactly we need, a kind of Copilot and what it is, right? And why it actually came into picture. Little bit of features around that, and then there are some ideas how you can implement Copilot for security within the SOC or maybe pilot it. There are some clues and hints which you can definitely take it. And obviously, there are some implementation learning which I have learned kind of throughout my implementation across the teams, and also something I have taken from Microsoft learnings as well. And at the same time, once we do all the implementation, because the idea here is whenever we bring in a tool, right, we have to measure the efficiency. So I'd also like to call out or share certain metrics here which can help you, to measure, okay, really if there is a productivity increase or really is there an efficiency increase after using that. And that will be followed by a demo, right? And then I'll have the Q&A, and obviously you can have Q&A anytime you want to, right? So with that said, I would like to do the introduction here. And in the introduction, right, so if you look at so the average cost of security breaches around 4.5 million, which is really a huge number. And the fact that it is important to know, because one breach can not only cause stop operations, it can also spoil the entire reputation of a big organization and things like that. And obviously there are big organizations who are running there, who are running basically there to have their own teams, but at the end of the day we're all humans, right? Now, doing something at a machine speed, it's really, really helpful for anybody who want to harness the power of it. The next thing is, I'd say, if you look at a detail or a time spent being by SOC team, right? So the core task is what, like hunting and investigation, is what a SOC analyst does or entire SOC team does, and 40% of that team time goes on that. And this is the place, the gap, right, wherein there are a lot of incident queues, wherein, and as an analyst, right, we are not able to fulfill or complete all the incident which are raised maybe within a day, or maybe at times we breach the SLAs and attack happens, and we don't have any idea what to do next. Now, the third thing is, rest of the time, right? Whatever we do, we run some queries, we do some IP checks, we do some, sanitization here and there. Then we try to build a report. That's even more cumbersome, because if you are building a threat, incident response report, if you have looked at a template, that's really, really huge. And if as a human, when I try to type it really become inconsistent, though we use a template. And obviously, depending on the nature of the thread, the report type always changes, right? The executive summary maybe always changes, or case to case basis, you can see different, pointers here and there. So that's where the whole time is being sent. Now, with that said, we would say Microsoft has introduced Copilot for security, and how it's gonna benefit us. It has, obviously, it is built based on OpenAI, with Microsoft security trained particularly for security incidents. And the way you can actually make it a hyperscale, because it doesn't come with a license, it totally runs on Azure with something called a security compute unit, SCU. So you can spin it up from one SCU to scale it up to anytime you want, depending on your consumption of your SOC team, right? That's why it's really, really scalable. And it is security specific orchestrator. That's because it really has connectivity, or the bridge between your other security tool like Microsoft Sentinel, Microsoft Defender, and there are other tools which are used for enterprise management. Let's say it is also tied up with Intune, it is also tied up with Entra ID. So having everything in one place, and putting it through the lens of OpenAI with a hyperscale architecture, and also the model behind the scene is actually trained for security, that's where you get the advantage of it. So at the end of the day, the idea here is to reduce the entire timing, like the turnaround timing, from an incident being raised to respond and close or take the preventive action. This entire time is being reduced once you start using it, right? So, and then apart from that, there are some add-ons. It is also tied up with Defender for Threat Intel, which is uh, arguably the biggest threat intel platform, as it's been. There's a heavy investment time at Microsoft as well. So that capability is also ingested. So that means when, as an analyst, you find an IP address, you find a URL, right? Defender backs it up, saying that it is really relevant, it is good, it is bad, how bad it is, and the backstory around that. Same thing goes for a CVE. So you get a CVE, really that CVE is good or bad, and if you skip the CVE, how much is the impact, what is the vulnerability can happen to your system, that all these things are basically backed up by here. Then obviously, as you know, cybersecurity is not a very, very, very much available skill. Now, with that said, let's say an analyst who has been working over 10 years in this domain, he might have an idea if any alert, let's say alert named brute force or any alert passwords break comes in. What are the steps? Do we need to check the IP addresses first? Then we need to check the user sign in. Then we need to check the user location and stuff like that, right? So these are the steps, and these are being called playbooks in terms of security. Now, what Copilot offers is converting the playbook into a prompt book scenario here, right? So what happens is, if there are 5 steps to be carried out for a particular incident response, everything can be pushed as a part of prompt book, and then they can run one after another without any analyst or even any human interacting that. But again, having said that, it is just the investigation part of it which is being eased for an analyst. So imagine that an analyst who was able to handle like 10 tickets a day, or let's say 20 incidents a day, right? With this, he might be able to do hundreds. He might be able to do like 150, things like that. That's one thing. Second thing is, the additional part is also available. Now, with all these things, the moment the scalability is grown from a team perspective or from an individual perspective, you also going to see that there are a lot of noises. Let's say, there are a lot of false positive. You write a detection rule that creates a false positive. Let's say that creates 50 false positive. With the help of Copilot, you should be able to reduce them, and you should be able to pass that phase and focus on actual actual attack scenarios or actual breach scenarios wherein your human intelligence comes into place. So this basically fits as an augmenter here, and with that augmentation, your efficiency spikes up. Let's look at a detail one, how basically you know um, it works from a user standpoint. And obviously I'll try to give a demo toward the session or toward the end of the session. But how it works, so let's say we submit a prompt saying that, give me top 5 incidents from Sentinel, or give me an executive summary for this particular incident ID. Then it basically goes to Copilot for security, and there's an orchestrator there that decides, right, based on your prompt, the prompt you have written, where all it should go. It basically builds the context. Let's say if I talk about get me the machine name, if I talk about get me the location of the user, or get me the sign in logs for the user, or get me maybe conditional access here. So all those things, context is being built by the orchestrator, and that decides with the plan. And that plan basically goes to each kind of connectors. And also there is a really interesting concept of plugins, which is, again, I'm going to show you in demo. So if you have a plugin in Copilot, let's say you can plug into Defender, you can plug into Enter ID, you can plug into Intune. Now in the same console, whenever you are analyzing as an incident, you can technically go to Intune and really do a deep dive, or Copilot can do a deep dive through the plugin, that what Intune has to offer, what Intune can contribute towards the incident being true positive or false positive. And then everything is combined together behind the scene, and a crisp response is given back to the user so that he can actually act upon it. So let's say if I say that I get an incident, if incident flow is like this, provide me the incident details or entry details for incident number 1234. That gives me, this has host A, IP B, and things like that. Now I would say analyze all these things, write another prompt. So in that way, that prompt will be orchestrated in such a way that if there's a host name, it's going to go to Intune, and in Intune, it'll find that it is it a compliant device, is it a right device, and maybe for the IP address, it'll go to different for threat intel, and then figure out if that IP has a bad reputation score, somebody reported it bad, and things like that. Same thing. If also that has a hash included, hash can also go for different for TI, or if you have a custom plugin written, that can go to that particular piece and then come back. Then let's say you have a use case saying that, for sign-in logs or brute force logs, brute force attacks and things like that, you write a prompt, it can connect to a plugin. That plugin can actually internally run a KQL query to go to that user's last 60 days sign-in logs and summarize, what is the blast radius, like how much area the user has tried to log in. Is it like 100 kilometers, 1,000 kilometers, and things like that. So that's kind of the idea of plugin here, and everything is wrapped around the response, and you respond back. So that's a quick summary of how you basically submit a prompt to response. And obviously everything is calculated on the SCU, as I mentioned earlier, that once you spin up, you really can scale it up to a team's capacity, right? Now, if we look at the next case, what we're going to talk about is, if we want to know the features what it has, I would say, there are really lot of features, even it is evolving at a very fast pace. But if I need to name a couple of them which are really handy or good to start with, are like summarization of incident. That basically there's a prompt built in, right? You can, or there's a prompt book also built in. You can utilize that. That summarizes your entire incident. Doesn't matter what incident is, right? It picks up the nature, and it goes to the entities and things like that, and try to do assessment and all stuff. Then, because it is also integrated with threat intel data, it kind of does a threat intel analysis for any entity which is being picked up as a part of your investigation. Then, defender coming into picture, it can also analyzes vulnerability assessment. And let's say, as a part of investigation, you have received a bash script, and maybe as an analyst I have no idea. I'm not very much equipped with maybe bash script at all. So I'm going to upload that and say that decrypt or make me understand this. It is going to read through that, right, and make me understand in the very layman terms that what that bash script is doing. So let's say you have a very complex PowerShell Empire script. You just upload it, say that, it's going to say that it's possibly a PowerShell Empire, and that's how it is done. All right. Then, as a part of investigation, right, one of the biggest challenge whatever we have seen is, whenever there's an incident, it's okay to see the incident, we investigate. Then the moment we need to go deeper, we need to write a KQL query. So whenever you try to write a KQL query, it's probably given that you have to have very good skill set in KQL. And with Copilot, that's also can be bypassed, because you just ask the query what to be there. Or in cases, let's say you are using this in terms of Defender, Copilot can also suggest you use this KQL to query for to do advanced investigation or advanced hunting. Then there is option for guided response. So let's say as a team we are starting Copilot for new, we're going to see there are couple of playbook, or sorry, couple of prompt book templates, and there's a GitHub repo. There are ample of them available as well, which you can literally utilize one after another, right? That uh, that's your investigation roadmap. So let's say, again, taking an example of brute force here. So if a brute force alert comes in, what you're going to do is, first thing is look at the incident. Step two is possibly look at the entities, and step three is isolate the entities around account, IP addresses. Now for account, go and check the sign-in logs. For IP addresses, go and check the reputation, and then summarize everything back, build a summary report, and conclude that if this is going to be true positive or false positive. So all these steps are kind of put it into a step-by-step manner, which works based on the previous input. So that's what is called prompt book. There are many more around that, as I say, which I've shown also in the previous slide. That plugin is really a powerful feature here, right, which is not mentioned. But with plugin, you can do, like, you can integrate other Microsoft products, the third party, even the same tools, third party tools. There are threat intel tools. If you want to integrate on top of Defender, you can do that. You can build your own custom plugin and things like that. So these are the features built and available, which you can basically look at things like that. Now, to start with, what are you going to look at? We're going to quickly look at incident summaries, how it works. So with incident summarization, basically this is a prompt, right? So you just say the summarize me this incident. It's going to say that, it's going to look at all the alerts inside that, all the evidence inside that, all the entities inside that. And it is, I would say, it's 90% faster than, because as you say, like, let's imagine you have an alert, and then, or you have an incident that has like 50 entities. So you have to go to these 50 entities, gather their information, document that, and then summarize that to build a total incident summary report. And on top of that, you also need to be context aware, right? Is this incident coming like daily twice, daily 5 times, and things like that. So end of the day, right, it helps to save the time a lot, to move on to the next case. And this is where, tying back to the previous comment I made, that once you are reducing your entire investigation timing, number one, you can investigate more. on a given time, and also you can reduce or bypass the noise really really faster, and then work on the actual possible attacks wherein you can spend more time. So these are the two really good benefits what are you going to get. Next thing is script analyzer. That's one of the prompt again here. I'm going to show all this in the security copilot console itself. So with this, as I mentioned, any script, so they're like attackers use Python, attackers use shell script, they use PowerShell, and there are cases, right? It's not technically possible to learn that just like that. So you just upload the script, and at times even they encrypt stuff which is really difficult to read, right? So you can just upload that to Copilot for security. It will decrypt and tell you what it is. Then let me get to the that we're talking about integration of threat intel data, as I talked about, right? So what it offers with that enrichment, whenever you are investigating an incident, right? Imagine on a normal case, you are using Sentinel or you're using Defender for any cases. So you get an IP address in Sentinel. You go to like public domain searches for the IP address, look at reputation. Maybe you go to VirusTotal if you're getting an IP address. If you get a URL, you may be going to some URL scans things. You might do a Tor browser, Tor IP check, and things like that, and that all things are reduced almost to zero, because when you do an investigation with Copilot for security, it does all those things for you, and then handpicks the information and then give it back to you as an analyst. So for you it's really a lot of time saving, and you have, so the steps you're supposed to do as a part of incident analysis, it's just done. Then obviously if you're doing an advanced hunting, right, you can also utilize that. So it is not only always need to be reactive. If you're doing a proactive hunting, right, you said that give me details about this IP address and things like that, it can do that as well. So it also helps you for proactive hunting and things like that. And on top of that, because it is linked to Defender for TI, right, so it always have the industry latest threat what's going on. So even if you are investigating something with Copilot for security, and then you give that IP, that IP had some latest happenings in the industry, right? Maybe that has picked out as a Tor IP address, or that has been picked up as a C2C source, something like that. It's going to figure it out, and it's going to tell that this is where it is. So that's kind of the thing when with this integration, it is not only helping you to build the efficiency, reduce your time, also talks about what latest and how you can be aware about it, right? The That's what about integrating this. Next thing what I'm going to talk about is vulnerability assessment. Obviously, whenever I talk about enterprises, they have machines, they have enterprises, and then the more the enterprises grows bigger, it really becomes a challenge to patch them, update them regularly. So having said that, so as you understand, right, technically it is very very challenging to update every patch, update every CBEs on real time. Now in that situation, if someone can come and tell you, right, what that CVE is and what it does, and if you do not have, what is the impact on the environment, right? It's going to tell you there are 50 machines in the environment which is having this CVE missing. It's going to impact ABC and things like that, right? So again, coming back to the point, it also helps you to analyze the vulnerability, and tells you, okay, what's missing and how much impact it's going to be, and with that you can sense how you can save it, right? So that's about understanding the vulnerabilities. Then this is what I would say a quick tour of the features, and as I say, there are many more coming in, and the tool is or the product is evolving almost every day. Then with that said, if we look at the ideas to adoption, right, so maybe this is a new tool, right, and with AI being in the market, it might be challenging if, because SOC teams or security operations team at times they are run traditionally, right? You have a hierarchy maybe, or you have standard operating procedures to follow for every incident come in. So now in that case, adopting a new tool, it will be just like you are already using 50 tools. It's just like another one, right? It might be really really challenging to adopt how you do that adoption, And then if you adopt it right away, obviously there is a efficiency increase. But before that, the step is here to adopt it the right way. So for that, I would say let's look at, you know, what are the possible things. So it's a let them try it. So as you say, if you're running a team or you're a team member, the idea is just to look at the console, because when I'll be demoing it, it's really really simple. It's not super complicated. There are no 50 buttons here and there. It's just a search box where you can get started with, right? But one thing you have to make sure that if you're running a SOC, or if you are responsible for organizations or multiple organizations as your environment, you are supposed to do the access management the right way, that SOC analysts get access to it and then they grow it over time or curate it over time. And then obviously when you say let them try, it means allowing them to just create Copilot with the security compute unit and let the team try. Maybe not the whole team, but if you cherry pick someone who is having a little bit of higher experience or maybe a little bit of lesser experience, all the cases works here. Next thing is, once we do that, right, so we can let them learn the prompts, right? So how to ideate a prompt. For example, as a team, again I'll take the example of brute force. So as a team, if we are having a playbook of brute force, saying that okay, if brute force comes, find out the IP addresses and evaluate the IP addresses, find out the user. The same logic or the same flow has to be converted into a prompt, and prompt is nothing but like a text in English. Obviously you're not going to get a super, optimized format the very first time. You need to kind of fine tune it over time. And that's where there is a Microsoft repository also available, wherein you can borrow the prompt from Microsoft, which is already built in to plug into your processes, right? So it's not only the tool what Microsoft offers, it's also there are inputs how to give it to that. That's also being offered from Microsoft itself as a part of GitHub repository, which you can definitely leverage to. Then once you do that, the idea here is, as a part of incident responder, right, we try to summarize also that, let's say I have 5 different incidents, right? What is the summary of that? Can I find attack pattern? Can I find attack path out of it, right? Out of those 5 incidents. Now with that, we have to encourage the team in a way that summarize whatever they have been doing in terms of, trying the Copilot, setting it for a prompt, and also reflect what is better, because you will definitely see some differences than your manual threat hunting and incident response whenever you're using Copilot, right? So there might be some positive, there might be some plus minuses here and there, but if we allow the team to reflect over there, right, that's where it's basically helps. Then the moment they find out the difference, right, they're going to tweak the prompts or rewrite the prompts in different way, and that's where they will figure out the intelligence of Copilot. So, and as an example, right, a person, his responsibility is to kind of create an incident summary report. Now he might be spending, let's say, x number of minutes to read through or scan through, analyze an incident, and then build a summary out of it on a given template. Allow him to do the same thing, or if he does the same thing with Copilot for security, just one single prompt, if we can make it to the right prompt. So that's where they will be able to figure out what is the right plugin. Now that's one case. Another case can be like, let's say you have a team and team has like 10 use cases, and in all 10 use cases, after step 2 or step 3, you basically run some particular KQL to do some advanced hunting or run a particular step. That step can be automated in terms of plugin. You create a plugin over there, and then that plugin sits there. So that's what that will be identified by the team eventually once they start using Copilot. And the more they use Copilot, they're going to see that, they can access to Intune, they can access to Enter ID to get, for example, if someone is analyzing impossible travel or a typical sign-in, right? Then with access to Enter ID, right, or Enter ID protection, that person can definitely go ahead and look at the risk of the user, right? Look at the last sign-in activity of the user. These things will be definitely be helpful without leaving the Copilot screen itself, and then eventually the team members and the whole team will be able to have a fair idea that using a single it's not just addition of a tool in their security analysis. It is just a augmenter here which basically helps their skill set, their expertise, and the tools they're using just to enhance it and make it at a faster pace. Then the next is it's all about, as I say, right? So once you give the team to explore this, or anybody, or maybe certain team members within the team, you access to Copilot, give them this place to explore, and then let them have their own way of learning with AI, because this model is tuned for security. So Copilot is tuned for security, and it's gonna answer very relevant towards the security. Now, different team members can learn things differently. For example, same prompt book can be written in two different ways by two different analysts, right? Maybe that can be converted into a plugin in future by a senior analyst, or things like that. So this can only happen if we basically let them work on their own. Obviously there are Microsoft guidance and there are Microsoft documentation, but with that in place, it's always very important to write the prompt and actually use the tool, right? So, and then obviously, in terms of security, right, there is no fixed path to fix a problem always. So there will be a time eventually for the threats, which used to take, like, to mitigate or to identify, even it used to take hours. Organically you're going to see that that's hours number is going to go down to minutes, because the team is now understanding that with Copilot, it's not only another tool to do some job, it's basically aggregating all the existing resources and also enhancing the capability for an analyst and the overall SOC performance altogether, right? So this is a few steps I have documented based on my learning and kind of experiences I've gathered from others as well. All right. Feel free to utilize this workflow to adopt it. And obviously, when you adopt it, you may not need to get the whole team in. If you want to, that's well and great, but you can try it on with one or two team members, or you can get started on your own as well, right? So that's how basically we talk about adoption, and there are the ideas. Now, next thing I'm going to talk about a little bit of implementation learnings. This is what, again, this has been learnings across some things I've learned from Microsoft, something I've learned from people I talk to, and with my own experiences. So it's a mix learning, and the learning is broken down specific roles. What happens now if we allow a junior analyst who is just new to use Security Copilot, right? So what's going to happen? They can speed up their learning curve, and the process can be faster from he being a junior analyst, and the output he is producing according to that. And also, let's say he is not very well understood in the environment, or maybe is not very well aware of the entire landscape, he can do that, right? But he basically understands how to speak a language. He can just type in the things, and Copilot can tell him how many machines are there. Let's say there's a big infrastructure, there's a big company infrastructure, there are like thousands of devices, there are like VNets, there are groups in Entra ID. So once you understand what to ask, right, it's going to answer that in a very, very faster way, and then that's where his learning also goes. Talking about the next step, as senior analyst. So as a senior analyst, we may be at times in a hurry, because the incident queue is always high. So there's a kind of target, or there's a SLA violation chance that as a senior analyst I have to finish it off, or I have to get to the root of it as soon as possible. So with that said, this can be really, really helpful here, wherein, as I said, like, if as a senior analyst we get some sort of code which is in a bash script, or which is in a shell script, or which is in a PowerShell, Python, whatever, which as an analyst I don't understand. Now, for me to understand that code, just putting that into Security Copilot is really relevant, because the model or Copilot will analyze that script in an intention to find vulnerabilities or find bad things around it. It's not going to explain the script what it's trying to do, right? It will explain in a way that what are the impact it can occur. Then obviously KQL being the one of the greatest language in Microsoft landscape, if you need to write an assistant, Copilot can give you exactly to that particular incident, that particular context, right? Then while you do that, you also need to care about, if doing that, do I create any vulnerabilities, do I open any backdoor, things like that. All those things can also be checked by Copilot, because a senior analyst knows these things to be checked. It just They just have to go and tell security Copilot, find this for me, right? Then after all this combined, right, if we talk about pure efficiency, now we have something called prompt books. As I mentioned earlier, right, by the name itself, prompt book is a step of prompts, wherein which is each prompt is dependent on the previous one. So as an example, you start investigate this incident 1 2 3 4. The next prompt you're going to write, give me the entities of that incident. So it's going to pick up the context from that previous prompt. So that's what a prompt book is, and prompt book is very, very helpful to make someone understand, if X kind of particular threat comes in, let's say brute force, right? What are the 5 steps I need to follow, and which should be after what? So it is a flow, and it also context aware whenever you're trying to use it, right? And the questions are really, really asked in a specific way. So, for example, if we are having a prompt book on a brute force, we say, give me the entities, give me the IP address, and do the reputation score. So if I just swap that reputation score with IP address later, it's not going to work, because there is nothing to find a reputation score for. So that's where this prompt book makes sense. And then it works as an augmentation tool. Again, I mean, I would like to add plugin piece here, because plugin is really, really something useful alongside prompt book, but that can only be possible if your team is kind of playing around with, Copilot for some time, find out some use cases which can be truly automated, right? Now, with that said, I'd say we also have some results, and you see the sources mentioned as well. You know what are the results? So I'd say people who used, they find 25% faster, and they were like 7% more accurate on the overall task across everything, right? Not only threat hunting, not only reporting. And almost everybody said that they want to do that once again, because whoever used it, right, as a part of testing, they really figured out that how beneficial it could be, wherein we almost spend half a day to build a report, or maybe a couple of hours, or maybe even 1 hour. It just a prompt, it takes less than 5 minutes to build the same report, right? So that's basically about implementation results. Now I'm gonna quickly jump onto the demo and show you some glimpse of Copilot, see if it is helpful. Let me try to share my Copilot screen. All right, so there we go. Now this is the URL. I'd say security copilot for Microsoft.com. And before we come here, right, what is expected is there has to be a Azure SEO unit provisioned for this particular instance to run, and then you have access management. So, and once it loads, obviously this is something I have been using for some time now, so you can see a lot of things popping up here and there. So as I say, right, this is not too much of a fancy stuff, no buttons much here and there. It's just that when you start writing your prompt, and how Copilot for Security can help, you just type in, give me the incidents, what exactly the incident number is, and that's going to give you the details. Now this is where you write prompt, and you can write any prompt you want to, right? And eventually you're going to fine tune. What I'm going to show you here as well is, you see there is an icon here, and if I click on that, there are really, really example prompts, right? You can convert a Unix timestamp, you can analyze security data, you can analyze a script command, things like that. So as I mentioned, right, it's not only the tool which is available, there are options, or there are inputs available how you can actually utilize this tool to tune it to your security needs. And then also there are prompt books. Let me click on see all system capabilities, and you can also search for any prompt you want to. That's the one you want to write, right? Let me get back. The next thing, I'm going to go to see all prompt books. As you see, there are like, I think as of today, there are five, but there are ways to build your own prompt books too. So if I click on this particular prompt book, right, click on this. Now, if you look at this, gave me seven prompts altogether. So all I need to do is I need to fill in the Defender incident ID. The moment I do that, it's going to say that summarize the Defender incident. And based on that output, what are the entities associated with it, right? After that, what are the reputation score for IPv addresses on that? Then after this, show me the authentication method set up for each user involved in the incident, right? So this basically will go to your Entra ID and then check off your MFA status. The previous one is going to go for Defender for TI and figure out the IP reputation score, right? This will go to Defender itself, right? And then figure out the entities associated with that particular incident. Then coming back to number five, right? If there are any devices which they are compliant or not. So this will go to Intune. And then if the devices are listed from the previous output, show the Intune and checked most recently. And if they have recent OS update, again, it's going to go back to Intune to figure out if there are latest updates. And then at the end of everything, so that means from number one says, give me a Defender incident ID, telling me the entities, then going to Defender for TI for IP reputation, going to Enter ID to check the MFA status, going to Intune to check compliant, going to Intune again to check for latest updates, and basis of all this information, it's going to summarize a report for you just by adding this. And it doesn't end here. You can basically edit any of these, right? Either you can delete them, you can change the sequence, you can add your own as well. If I want to write, you can add your own as well. So I just go to edit and add your. So that means if you have a particular use case for any incident, you know, investigation, you can always make one based on your team. And this is where once you let your team figure this out, they're going to plug and play based on their experiences and their understanding what they do day in day out, let's say as an investigation of an incident. And that's where once they're able to templatize this piece, it's going to be rinse and repeat. So once it is done, anybody can use it. So imagine that the incident which takes like X amount of time, that really drastically, exponentially goes down to minutes. And this is where you get it. All right. So to show an example how it looks like, I will go to the left navigation. I would say my sessions, and hopefully there are some sessions. All right. You see, these are the sessions I have just, done all these things. So maybe I will say suspicious script analysis. I'll click on that. And then there is another interesting part that is called you can share things. So if you look at, right, by the time it loads, I'll just give it some time for it to load. So what we look at the URLs, it says sessions and then let's say mostly shock team works also in shifts, right? And somebody has already done something in the past. Now all you're going to do is share that. You can add an email or you can copy the link. If you copy the link, people who have access to, they can directly access these findings. So that means it is not only that you are easing your process, you have done an investigation that is documented already here. You just share your findings and that can be taken. So there is no scenario of you document it to some other system, somebody picks it up, read again, and then so all these times are basically saved because you can see a real response. And you can see here, I've just tried to do a script analysis and I'll expand this. It process requests, prepared a request, and then this is the response it looks like, right? And for each and every response, right, Microsoft asks for feedback. So if I click on that, we can always flag it out whatever you need to. And this is where your model tuning comes into play. Depending on how much feedback you or your team is giving here, the model basically adopts, right, and try to get better results over time. So that's about kind of how you give feedback and things like that. And obviously you can use other actions, editing that, reloading or resubmitting that just to test it again if it happened 10 days back. Do you rule that once again and things like that. Now, the next thing is I'll go back to the security copilot home screen again. And once it loads, again, I'll go back to this one, prompts. And as I mentioned, right, see all prompt books. If I go, you can, okay, no matching prompt books, but there are five. And if I, let's take another one, right, Microsoft Sentinel investigation. You see, this is the same thing, but there's a little difference here. It checks all the things, but it can also go to Sentinel as a base thing here. Now, let's try to add another prompt quickly. I'd say threat actor profile. So now if you look at, this is a different thing altogether, this prompt book, right? So prompt book is, we can lightly say that it's a conversion of the playbooks being used in SOC, right? So it says give me a profile and there's an input, and it's basically a function which is a multiple prompt driven, and then as usual it checks all the possible places, and you can add a prompt or you can delete a prompt. Now, once a team or anybody starts using it, they start writing prompt, they start writing prompt books and things like that. Eventually they start to find the efficiency matrices, like how they can write efficient prompts and also how they can build prompt books. But beyond that, let's say if you want to connect, like as an example, when I was talking about the prompt on let's say investigation, right, as I've shown here, it is going to defender for ti, it is going to enter id here, it is going to intune, right? How do we leverage other tools? That's what another feature. So there's a quick button here called sources. If I'm going to click on here, right? So if you look at, Microsoft has already made things available where you can integrate other products. And once you integrate it, like this is where you configure, right? And if I go to show 9 more, let's say defender for ti, defender for entra, intune, and obviously there's no license, so purview is not available. Microsoft Sentinel, natural language for KQL, even that's a plugin, and Azure AI search. If you want to set up, let's say you want to embed one Azure AI search as a part of your integration and your response should come from, you can do that too, right? These things are plugins, and that's where you can actually connect to other systems, right? And this doesn't end here. There are non-Microsoft product as well, right? If I go down, you can see there are other security product as well. For example, Darktrace, right? If you want to set up Darktrace integration, you just set it up here. You want to go for Trainwise Enterprise or Community, you can set it up here. There are ample of connectors available, and as I mentioned, I'm also going to show you the GitHub repository, which talks about these plugins or prompt books in detail, right? Now, if you observe here, we are in plugins. Now, if I switch to files quickly, you can upload your files up to 3 MB, and it can be in this format, and that can also act as a knowledge base for your Copilot. For example, you have some process document, procedure document, which you can always do that, right? And add on here. So imagine using a tool which is basically a collection of all of other you know yes, I will share the report, the link of the report shortly, but before that let me get to that. So that's how you can look at, and obviously, and to add to this, right, if I keep scrolling down, as you can see the number of plugins available, there is a quick little thing. It can also go to public website if you want it to be, but if you don't want, you can just go over there. Now, there is one custom wherein you can write your own plugin, wherein let me just try to share the repository here. Yes, so I just shared that link for GitHub repo, which I'm going to present in a while as well. Coming to the point here, you can build your own plugin, right? It can be a KQL based plugin, it can be a OpenAI based plugin, things like that, right? That's where you basically see things and go about it, right? Now, closing this is what Copilot has to offer. And in the left navigation, as I mentioned, right, it's important that you also have the right role assignments. Right now, there's nothing much. So I'd say all three owners, you can add contributors, and that's how you do it. But again, that's more of a setup thing. Once it is set up the right way, you can always go and start utilizing it. I would jump onto the prompt book library quickly. Now, as you see here, there are really prompt books which you can run it here, and this has really input specific what each prompt looks like or prompt book looks like. Now, as an extension, I'll try to bring up the GitHub here. The GitHub is github.com azure/copilot for security, which I pasted in the screenshot, chat as well. And if you look at whatever is available in Copilot, you can see all available in Copilot. You can also leverage some logic apps to extend Copilot capabilities as a really, really heavy automation or really, really, smart automation here. And these are the things which are available. Now, if I go to prompt book sampling, because the number is really huge, close it out. As you can see here, PowerShell manage email header. So if I open that, right, let's say email header analysis. So if you look at the same thing, whatever you talked about, there are like, this is a 9 prompt built-in prompt book. So you can have your email address as an input, and that goes, starts finding on every places whatever it is supposed to find, right? So that's how it looks like. You can also refer for some sample, you know, prompts here. If I go for Microsoft Entra, who am I, things like that. What are the login item exist for the user for last 14 days, something, some sample prompts available here, which is basically going to query your Entra ID itself depending on the plugin enabled, right? Similar to that, there are other things from Intune Purview, external attack surface, and things like that. A quick look on to the plugins. I'd say let's go to community-based plugins. You can see Alien Vault, you can see GitHub Advanced Security, right? All those plugins. And if I go to each of them, they have custom plugins, and these things are ready to upload in your Copilot instance, and the team can definitely leverage it, right? So that's pretty much, I would say, how you can utilize the Copilot for. Now, coming back to the slides, how you basically so there are, again, this is based on my experience and learning. If you are having defined metrics as you can do it, but let's say a couple of things which you can pick up. It's mean time to respond, like the average time an analyst takes using or without using Copilot. Incidents worked per day, how much incident they're able to either, make it true positive, false positive, or get to a conclusion, or do some findings, or close it. And then the resolution, right? How you basically make these things achievable. Let's say side by side challenge with two best analysts if you have a team, right? Next thing is, if there is somebody new, just we can ask them to use Copilot. Then we take the same use case with or without Copilot, and then, you know understand what is the team efficiency grows like. It is not about using the technology always, it's about the efficiency when the team learns to optimize things, and let's say whatever they have been doing the same thing or even more with a lesser time, right? So with that said, I'd say I will jump onto the Q&A session and open for question. But a quick summary: if you're using Copilot, make sure that you spin it up and give the right access to the right people so that they can start investigating, and try to enable the plugins and have them try that on their own, right? Obviously, with Microsoft documentation in place. So, any questions? Okay, so the question here is, what does it run behind the scenes? Is it just data from infra? No, technically for that, I need to go back to one of the slides I have. Let me see if I can go back. Okay, give me 1 second. So if you look at it, is not always the data because it might look that simple, I'd agree. But what happens is the moment we write a prompt, right? It basically breaks that prompt and orchestrate that where exactly it should go and fetch the data for. And then once it gets the data, right? For example, in the prompt book I showed, it goes to Intune, gets some data, it goes to, Enter ID, gets some data, and then and the way it converts like from your prompt to the actual query, that's what Copilot does. And also if you have a plugin, right, which is going to third party stuff like that, wherein it gets the data and then gives back to Copilot, and Copilot basically summarizes to the context what is being worked on. So if you have written first prompt, give me the incident details on 1234, get me the entities, look for the entities in Defender. So that's going to pick up that entities and going to talk about the context with that incident, not something like which happens like maybe 6 months back, something like that. So it might look like that it is just fetching the data, but behind the scene it orchestrates, build a context, and you know finds out the right thing to apply. And then once it is responded, Copilot again wraps it up and then give it back to a user understandable format. Hope that answers. Any other question? Okay, so another question is, which is efficient training? Is it data or prompt? So few things to understand, right? Number one is, whenever you're talking about Copilot for security, Microsoft has already trained it for answer it in a security context, to act it like a security analyst, maybe a senior analyst and things like that. So we don't need to train it technically. We can add some knowledge bases, as I say, like upload the documents, we can use plugins. Rather, it's a good idea to fine tune the prompts so that we can get a crisp response, because the data, whatever it is acting on, right, that's already there. So it's Sentinel, it's Defender, it's Intune, and any other plugin you've enabled, right? That's the data source. So technically it's all production level data, which it's is like we do not have control to manipulate or make it like a training data set. It's already in there. It's just that we write the prompt right away to find it out the information we are looking for. Any other questions?
Yes, we have one more question from Brett. Yeah. Yes, he asks like, does Copilot run on top of semantic kernel, or is semantic kernel preview still too early? Seems like a good eat your own dog food use case.
I would say again, this is a question because see the way Microsoft has recommend, published it as a built-in model, right? So I would wait for further releases and further documentation to come out to get more architectural details. But let me try to find out if I can show you some architectural details here. So technically, as long as there is no documentation, we need to possibly wait for Microsoft to, get some documentation around that. And maybe what I would say is it's built on AI with a Microsoft security specific model is what would be the case right now. Let me paste also the link in the chat if possible. Yep. Any other questions?
Yeah, so we don't have questions coming in. So let's call for a wrap.
Sure.
Thank you everyone. Thank you so much, and thank
Thank
you
you,
Samik
everyone.
for doing this. It was an exciting session, and thank you once
Thank
again.
you.
Thank you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Good evening to you all.